Welcome to the Fowler Museum's exhibit of some of its magnificent collection of Southeast European traditional clothing, both rural folk costumes and urban festive wear. They embody a specific European cultural tradition of clothing, elements of which can be traced back by archaeologists for not just 1,000 years, but 4,000, 6,000, even 20,000 years. But we'll come to that. First, let's look at these representative women's costumes from the Central Balkan Peninsula, mostly from the same villages as the ones in the exhibit. Most archaic in form are those worn by remote rural people who persevered as Christians during the many centuries of Ottoman Turkish rule, principally speakers of South Slavic, Albanian, Greek, and Eastern Romance, that is, Romanian and Vlach. Young women spent their girlhoods learning to spin, weave, sew, and embroider, making many of the textiles they would need when married, the towels, sheets, and blankets. But especially, the girl would make the elaborate outfit she would wear from the time she reached puberty until the birth of her first child. Everything depended on this outfit, for her worth as a bride was judged largely by the skill and industriousness that her outfit displayed. And forget the notion of fashion. The form of her dress was closely ordained by the village she grew up in. Each piece, each color, each motif having strong and traditional cultural significance. Only in little details could she show her individuality and personal artistry. What fill our museums, for the most part, are the outfits made by these young women, scrutinized especially during the village dancing every Sunday afternoon. And since the natural habitat of these costumes is dance, it is in dance that they are best seen and understood. The most archaic costumes are basically red, white, and black, an ancient Indo-European color scheme in which red color stood for blood and hence life. White denoted purity and ritual power, and black referred to the dark earth and the food it produced. The foundation garment in all these costumes is the chemise or tunic, a long white linen garment looking like a shirt at the top and a skirt or petticoat at the bottom. With a belt at the waist and a coat in the winter, this was about all a little girl wore. But when the girl reached puberty, she typically added one or more aprons or overskirts and lots of fringes that signified she was now able to bear children. Then when she married, she donned a headdress completely covering her hair, which is where her fertility was thought to reside. She also added jewelry intended to glitter and clink so as to distract sickness demons and the evil eye. And she wore this protection until after the birth of her first child. Half the costumes you see here come from Macedonia. The most archaic ones, loaded with the sacred fringes, come from remote uplands, Alexa's and mine. And the first costume you'll see in the exhibit are from Mariovo in the southwestern highlands, while Sharon's is from Drenok in the west along the mountainous Albanian border. And the one worn by Caitlin with its distinctive wings comes from the capital town of Skopje to the north. You'll find both the summer and the padded winter versions of it in the exhibit. Also heavily fringed, but in black, is Joanne's Karaguna costume, typical of Vlach shepherds who wandered the mountain spine, running from central Greece up through Macedonia into Serbia and Romania. This is the southern version. Katie's costume is from Šumadija, the oak-forested heartland of Serbia. In Šumadija, the archaic striped and pleated woolen apron worn in back, which has the same significance as the fringes, is usually tucked up, forming a distinctive beetle wing shape. Finally, from Stara Zagora in the mountains of southeastern Bulgaria comes Julie's costume with a different archaic form, a jumper over a chemise. The vertical strips of decoration on the skirt may be a visual reminiscence of the fringes. You'll see one of those in the exhibit also. And we'll see the origins of these features presently. Another key announcement of a girl's coming of age was the fact that now she was both allowed and obliged to join in the traditional dancing in the village square for hours on Sunday after church. The dance line, as we said, was where marriage girls were particularly seen and inspected, and where they had to look their best. Hence, we find a two-way influence of the costumes on the dances and of the dances on the costumes. An important theme we'll explore this afternoon with the dancers. Note, for example, that the length and tightness of the women's chemises prevent them from lifting their feet and legs the way you saw the men doing. The specialty of Macedonian women is in the proud way they carry their shoulders, arms, and hands as they lift their bodies subtly with foot and hip muscles. Here's a short sample from Bulgarian Macedonia.
Katuše, pusto katuše, što ti bilo crno pisano. Katuše, pusto katuše, što ti bilo crno pisano. Baš pijanica da zemiš, taj Nikola oko careta. Baš pijanica da zemiš, taj Nikola oko careta. Side mučinja na murve, tvoj to momčina vejana. Side mučinja na murve, tvoj to momčina vejana. Oj, lele, lele, katuše, izgori pjane za tebe. Oj, lele, lele, katuše, izgori pjane za tebe.
Gathered fustani or fustanellas, named after a sturdy cloth woven for centuries in Fustat, Egypt. These tightly gathered skirts, worn in parts of Greece, Albania, and Macedonia, are actually shirt tails, which became so large and ostentatious that it was easier to make them as a separate skirt. Watch the legs and notice the toes in this typical men's dance. The kilt-like fustan, worn by Alan and Mike, was used only in some parts of the Balkans. Mostly like Dominic on the end, men wore trousers, but variously cut and usually made of heavy felted wool in white, black, or brown, with contrasted braid or piping along the seams and as decoration. Here and there, from Montenegro to Crete, one finds short baggy pants influenced by Turkish styles like Milton's, made of thinner cloth with an enormous amount of material between the legs. The vests, too, were influenced by the Turkish habits, especially those encrusted with metallic braid. The very swashed false sleeves, like Allen's, are a yet older phenomenon, at least 2,500 years old, and there are some truly stunning examples of these from Albania in the exhibit. What we dancers notice most about Balkan dancing, however, is the profound effect of the traditional shoes. Although differing somewhat from one area to another, these so-called opansi are absolutely flat, heelless leather or rawhide moccasins with plated leather or cord tops and turned-up toes. They are ideal for the quick little steps, flat-footed slaps, and toes curled around ankles that abound in Balkan dancing. Steps that are virtually impossible to do in the heeled boots worn farther north in Hungary and the like. By the same token, many Hungarian steps are quite impossible in opansi, as we shall see later. Watch the feet now in this typical Serbian kolo dance, with a much bouncier, looser limb style than the Bulgarian and Macedonian dances we've just seen. It will be followed by a bit of Bulgarian dance with a rather different repertoire of steps geared to flat-soled opansi. Good. Now let's take a look at the historical development, Twister, about haymaking. Skirts. You've just seen some of the ways Croatian and Hungarian girls make them fly, and you'll see more in a minute. It's all so utterly different from the Central and South Balkan movements of dancers and their clothing. Hungarian village girls, in fact, felt that the height of elegance was to wear so many petticoats under their tightly pleated skirts that they couldn't even sit down, but could only subside into a squatting position, surrounded by a huge wheel of fabric. The skirts, moreover, were often quite short, allowing for even greater freedom of movement. But note also the footwear. Croatians wore flat moccasins, but the Hungarians and Slovaks typically wore footwear with a heel. Joanna, hold up one of your slippers. And this has a very strong effect on the dancing. You can put it back on now. The girls loved to rock and sway on their heels, which made their skirts fly even more. Now, the south central town of Kalaksha was and still is famed for its lavish floral embroidery, as you see here, and as you'll see in the exhibit. But the Kalaksha girls took up the habit of wearing Turkish-style backless clogs, like the ones Joanne just showed you, in the summer. And although these little side. Men also used their boots to maximum elegance, but in a very different way, clicking their heels, which often carried spurs, and smartly slapping their boot tops in various rhythms. Milton. Note that all these things are quite impossible to do wearing short, flat moccasins, just as some of the Balkan steps are impossible to execute in heeled boots. In most of Hungary, the men wear black boots and dark pants with a copiously sleeved white shirt and some sort of elegant vest. Sometimes they are very short, like Mike's. Sometimes longer, like Milton's. In Kalaksha, the men wear heavily embroidered shirt fronts, as Alan is. That was 3 months of faculty meetings. Whereas in the Carpathian Mountains, both on the Hungarian and Romanian side, the men wear warm sheepskin vests and mantles heavily embroidered with flowers, like Stephen's. You can inspect a very handsome example in the exhibit, courtesy of Patty Annawalt. And we can't miss Dominic. In one small but famous area of Hungary, among the Matyó clan, the men as well as the women wore aprons magnificently embroidered with those flowers we've become so familiar with. Notice also the very long tied silk fringe. The pants, too, are so full that they billow out like women's skirts as the men dance. One more point about the women's costumes. As in the Balkans, unmarried girls usually wore headdresses that let their hair show. So there are 3 of them over there. Whereas married women were obliged to cover theirs. But instead of talking about it, let's see these remarkable costumes in motion, as they were meant to be seen in the traditional Sunday afternoon dancing, while the young people in particular look each other over. First, a verbunk from Kabuvar, and that's a recruiting dance in which the men strut, while the girls, doing their own dance, quite different dance, watch from the middle. Then we'll finish with an example of that most famous of Hungarian couple dances, the Csardas.
Let's give one more round of applause for it.